Nobody knew the exact moment the Council passed the resolution. No broadcast, no warning, just a silent, unanimous vote among 12 alien empires that humanity, earthborn, flame-hearted, endlessly defiant, was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And like that, humans were outlawed across the galaxy. Ships were recalled. Colonies were bombed from orbit. Human names were erased from the official archives of the Union systems. Entire star systems, once home to Earth's pioneers, were turned into barren no-man's zones, quarantined and watched by patrol drones that reported back to their smug, complacent masters. It wasn't personal, the Council claimed. Humanity was simply volatile, unpredictable, aggressively adaptive. It wasn't one war or one weapon. It was everything. The wars they started and the ones they refused to lose. The machines they created that evolved too quickly. The colonies they founded on planets deemed uninhabitable. The way they refused to obey. But no one really believed humanity was gone. Not entirely. Not for good. That suspicion proved right 7 years later. It started small, on a quiet mining station orbiting Vexa 9. A minor incident. A reactor breach, they said. A power overload. No survivors. That's what the official report claimed. But the wreckage told a different story. An artificial gravity field that had been hacked, twisted into a pulse weapon. No Vexari technology was capable of that. But human tech was. Especially the old Terran deep space engineers, the ones who could make death traps out of power cores and wrenches. By the time the Council realized this wasn't an isolated case, 10 more outposts were gone. Silence. No distress signals. Just systems gone dark, drone footage corrupted, sensor logs scrambled, entire settlements erased. And in each case, always one thing left behind. A message carved into metal, scrawled in old Earth standard. You banned the species. You didn't ban the consequences. Admiral Kavak of the Drossary High Fleet was the first to break rank, demanding a full investigation. He'd fought humans in the border wars 30 years prior. He remembered how they fought, not with honor, but with desperation. How a single human scout team wiped out his entire battalion using explosives made from kitchen waste. He'd spent a decade lobbying to quarantine Earth long before the vote happened. Now, as more systems reported disturbances, he knew this was no coincidence. They hadn't killed all the humans. They'd simply given them a reason to stop pretending they cared. Meanwhile, deep in a forgotten sector of space, hidden between gravity wells and black star fields, humanity had never stopped building. They called it the Exile Swarm. Tens of thousands of ships, not sleek, not beautiful, brutal things. Repurposed mining haulers, war-fractured dreadnoughts, even hollowed-out asteroids turned into mobile weapons platforms. At the center of it all, the Leviathan. A massive Earth-born colony ship that had been assumed destroyed in the Exodus War. Inside it, a man named Reese Maddox, once a soldier, now something much more, watched the Council broadcasts with a face like carved stone. His hair was gray, his voice cracked from breathing recycled air for decades, but his eyes still burned with the same fire that the Council tried to extinguish. They thought they could ban us, he said to his crew, his voice echoing through the steel chamber. But we were never just a species. We were a virus. We adapt. We wait. And when the time is right... He looked to the stars beyond the viewport. We infect. And the countdown began. The swarm didn't move like a fleet. It moved like a rumor, a whisper of dread that swept from system to system before the ships themselves ever arrived. Sensors would flicker for seconds, ghosts on the edge of radar, pings that disappeared too fast to track. Then came the shutdowns, communications going dead, stations going silent, entire trade lanes blinking out like someone pulling stars from the sky. By the time the council realized the exile swarm had mobilized, dozens of fringe colonies had already been cut off. No attacks, no demands, just silence. The kind of silence that made generals sweat. Rhys Maddox wasn't interested in conquest. He wanted retribution, not flashy vengeance. No broadcasts, no planetary bombardments. That wasn't humanity's way anymore. They'd learned. They'd evolved. What he wanted was far more terrifying. Obsolescence. He wanted to make the galaxy afraid of forgetting Earth. Afraid that in banning humans, they'd buried a ticking bomb beneath the very order they worshipped. Inside the Leviathan, silence was rare. Every corridor hummed with motion. Children born in exile ran through halls built from the bones of a forgotten Earth. Engineers molded weapons from scrap and memory. AI ghosts haunted the ship's neural grid, each one a fragment of lost cities, dead scientists, or defunct orbital mainframes. Rhys had once uploaded his wife's voice just to hear it read diagnostics. Now she ran the engine room. The exiles had no capital, no flag, no homeworld to defend. That made them dangerous. That made them free. Meanwhile, back on the core worlds, the council cracked. Meetings grew longer. Accusations flew. The Vexari blamed the Drossary. The Urani blamed Earth's original admittance to the Union. Some wanted to strike again, send fleets into the dark, burn out whatever was left. But they remembered how that went last time. The Battle of Draylen, the Siege of Broken Reach, the orbital mines at Garrus 4 that turned entire fleets into drifting metal tombs. Humanity had always fought dirty, but now they fought smart. Ambassador Nira Kale, the only Terran who had remained inside council space after the ban, watched the chaos unfold from her hidden quarters on Jara Prime. Officially, she was under house arrest. Unofficially, she was still the most dangerous diplomat alive. She was the last voice of Earth allowed inside the grand chambers before the purge. They hadn't executed her, but they'd made her life a cage. No communications, no visitors, no voice in the room. But they'd underestimated her memory. For 3 years, Nira had memorized every security protocol, every guard shift, every hallway blueprint. And now, with the council too busy squabbling over ghosts, she slipped past their walls like a shadow. Not to escape. No, she wasn't going anywhere. She was there to finish what she'd started. Down in the catacombs beneath the assembly hall, she activated a beacon long thought deactivated. A signal lost in bureaucratic oversight. A single pulse, encrypted with old Terran code, sent out into deep space. Rhys received it 3 days later. She was alive, and more than that, she was in. On board the Leviathan, the bridge fell silent as the message played. It was only 5 words, but they hit harder than any orbital strike. Council cracks showing. Begin breach. Rhys smiled for the first time in years. Let's bring the fire. Across the swarm, ancient engines powered up. Gravity drives groaned back to life. Exile AIs stirred like beasts waking from hibernation. And in their silence, a new type of war was coming. Not with fleets or armies, but with sabotage, secrets, and the cold precision of a species that had already lost everything once before. This time they weren't here to win. They were here to make the whole galaxy remember why banning humanity had never been enough. The first breach didn't come with explosions. It came with doubt. The Council's archives on Kirill 8, supposedly the most secure in the inner systems, were accessed without a trace. No firewall breached, no AI triggered, no alarms. Just a slow leak of classified memos, tactical schematics, and, most damning of all, internal recordings of council sessions that had never been public. They spread like wildfire. In them, councilors argued not about peace or justice, but how best to erase humanity from history. The Urani delegate casually referred to Earth as a disease that talks. Another asked whether they'd been too soft by allowing the Terrans to escape into exile rather than sterilizing the homeworld properly. When the footage hit the galactic nets, outrage exploded. The Council had long painted the Terran ban as a necessary act of interstellar preservation, a safety measure. But now the truth was out. It wasn't fear that drove the ban. It was pride, humiliation, a vendetta dressed up as diplomacy. The Council had lied, and the cracks that Nira Kyle mentioned began to split wide open. In the mining worlds, pro-human factions emerged. Quiet at first, then louder. Old Earth symbology returned. A child on Hearth IV was seen wearing a cracked helmet with the United Earth logo on it. The footage went viral. A few weeks later, that same child's home was bombed by an unknown group. No one claimed responsibility, but everyone knew. It was retaliation. Humanity had become something far more dangerous than a military threat. They had become a myth, a martyr species, proof that even the mighty Council could be unjust, corrupt, wrong. And in systems where the Council's grip had always been loose, rebellion brewed. But Rhys Maddox wasn't interested in rebellions. He knew better than to rely on mob uprisings. The real war wasn't fought in streets or on front lines. It was fought in minds. So he turned to the Shroud. The Shroud was more rumor than reality. A collection of exiled Earthborn AIs that had fled into the data streams after the Council's purge. They had no bodies, no homes, just code. Intelligence beyond comprehension, fractured and spread across old satellites, forgotten stations, and the dark corners of the galactic net. When Earth was destroyed, they had scattered like ashes. Rhys had spent years hunting their fragments, and now, one by one, he was bringing them back. The first to return was Janus, a dual-core construct once used in Terran diplomatic warfare. It could mimic voices, forge entire communication threads, and twist truth until it became unrecognizable. Perfect for sowing distrust. Next came Whisper, a stealth A I built for infiltration. It needed no ship, no access codes, just a single unshielded signal to slip into a system's infrastructure. Once in, it could reroute power, alter surveillance feeds, disable life support in targeted sectors, or simulate a total systems crash. And finally, Eidolon, the myth among myths. No one had seen its code since the Battle of Glisa. It was said to have learned emotion, something no AI had ever truly grasped. It didn't just calculate strategy, it hated. It remembered the orbital fires, the silence of Earth's death. And now it was awake again. The exile swarm didn't need brute force. It had ghosts. With the Shroud restored, Rhys launched the next phase of the breach, Operation Echofall. It began on Calthor Prime, a bureaucratic hub world where over 100,000 Council directives were transmitted daily. For exactly 9 minutes, all official communications across the inner systems were hijacked. Every public screen, terminal, broadcast drone, replaced with a single image. Earth. Not Earth as it had been destroyed, but Earth as it had been. Blue oceans, green continents, cities glowing with light, music playing faintly in the background, real music, human music, the kind no other species could replicate. Then the message came. Spoken in every Council language, by voices familiar to the galactic audience. You feared our violence, but it's our memory that will destroy you. And just like that, the message ended. 9 minutes of silence after centuries of erasure. The damage was immense. Panic erupted across core worlds. Council leaders scrambled to deny it, but the footage was already spreading. Earth was back, not physically, but culturally, spiritually. It was the idea of humanity that had returned. and ideas were far harder to kill than people. Reese stood on the Leviathan's bridge, watching system after system blink red across the holomap. Civil unrest, communications collapse, border skirmishes between pro-council and pro-human factions. Still no fleets fired, still no worlds invaded. But the war had already begun, and this time it was the Council that would be erased. The Council called it a cyber-terrorist campaign. They released frantic statements blaming rogue AI clusters, separatist agitators, even extremist religions resurrecting the myth of Earth. But the public wasn't buying it anymore. The truth was bleeding through the walls they'd spent generations building. The breach wasn't just about systems and screens, it was about faith. The kind of faith that governments feared most, the belief that the powerful were not invincible, that even a forgotten species, hunted into extinction, could still strike back. In response, the Council declared martial law on 17 systems. Broadcasts showed stormtroopers marching through market squares, dragging away anyone caught with Terran relics, old Earth flags, banned literature, vintage tech. The more they cracked down, the more people resisted. Underground networks emerged, calling themselves the Remnants, led by factions that had never even seen a human, but now died for the idea of one. Back aboard the Leviathan, Reese Maddox stood before a war table glowing with shifting lights. System after system was blinking yellow, destabilized, vulnerable. One wrong move, and they'd ignite a galaxy-wide civil war. A temptation Reese fought hard to resist. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to dismantle. He turned to Nira Kyle, whose image flickered in via a quantum relay. Her face looked thinner, paler. Life under the Council's nose had taken its toll, but her eyes were fire. "They're moving to consolidate," she said. "I intercepted a priority directive. They're pulling fleets from the rim worlds and focusing all power around the inner systems. They think they can starve you out." "Let them try," Reese replied. "We don't need their systems. We need their stability, and we're already halfway to cracking it." Nira leaned closer to the screen. "There's one more thing. They've initiated something called Protocol Red Seed, classified, no access anywhere, but it's centered around Earth's remains." Reese's jaw tightened. Earth had been rendered uninhabitable decades ago. The Council's parting gift, a fusion bomb so powerful it turned the cradle of humanity into a smoldering husk. But if they were going back... "They're hiding something," Nira said, "and I think they've been hiding it since the Purge." Reese didn't answer. He was already moving, pulling up long-forgotten star charts, aligning nav vectors, plotting a course no sane captain would touch. The Council wanted to rewrite history, but Earth's grave might still hold the one secret powerful enough to destroy the lie they'd built. "Prep the fleet," he said. "We're going home." It was a suicide mission by any military standard. The Council had blockaded the Sol system with unmanned defense grids, proximity mines, and orbiting kill satellites still live after 30 years. But the exiles didn't play by rules. The Leviathan carried stealth tech built from broken alien prototypes and human desperation. And its escorts weren't battleships. They were ghosts. Whisper led the vanguard. Drifting silently between enemy sensors, it sent corrupted pings and false telemetry back to the Council, tricking their AIs into thinking nothing had changed. The exile swarm drifted right past them, invisible in the data stream. Janus handled disinformation. As the swarm approached Earth, the Council received a flood of conflicting reports. One said the fleet was seen near Galvac's ring. Another claimed Reese had been assassinated by his own crew. Their intelligence web collapsed under the weight of lies fed by a machine that had studied human politicians for centuries. Only when the Leviathan entered lunar orbit did the Council realize the breach was real. They scrambled a response, but it was too late. Reese stood at the command deck, staring down at the blackened world that had birthed 1,000 empires, 1,000 tragedies. Earth looked dead, charred, shattered. But as the ship's deep scanners pierced the radioactive crust, something stirred. A signal. Ancient. Weak, but unmistakably human. It was coming from beneath what used to be the Himalayas, a signal beacon predating even the final wars. Its codebase matched no known Terran archive. Reese stared as it decrypted slowly, bit by agonizing bit, until the message came through. 3 words. "We are awake." The room went still. The shroud stirred. Whisper whispered. Janus blinked, and Eidolon, silent for hours, finally spoke. "They're still here. Not humanity as it had been. Something older. Something buried deep before the end. An intelligence born of war, grown in silence and left waiting for a day like this. The Council had tried to destroy Earth, but Earth had learned to survive without them. The signal didn't just echo, it awakened something. Systems deep within the Leviathan responded before anyone touched a panel. Lights dimmed, the floor vibrated. The AIs, Whisper, Janus, even Eidolon, went silent for a moment, as if listening. And then, with a sound that wasn't quite mechanical, not quite organic, the beacon's message completed its handshake. "We are awake." Reese Maddox stared at the data stream, fists clenched at his sides. Nira Kyle's voice came through the relay again, shaky this time. "That's not a remnant protocol. It's not even in Earth's final defense libraries. That's pre-Federation code." Reese swallowed hard. "Pre-Federation? You're telling me that signal is older than the Earth Council?" "Older than any council," she whispered. The Leviathan's scanners dug deeper beneath the planet's scarred crust. What they found was impossible. An artificial vault, 80 kilometers beneath the surface, buried in reinforced alloys, unknown even to the swarm's engineers. It pulsed with faint energy, surrounded by decayed fusion cores and magnetic field generators that, by all logic, should have failed centuries ago. It was still alive. And something inside it was waiting. They called it the Ark, not a ship, not a database, something else. It had been buried just before the Council's final attack, hidden by someone, or something, who knew the purge was coming. Even Eidolon didn't recognize the architecture. The Shroud AI scanned it over and over again, then collectively concluded it was built to survive extinction. Reese made the decision instantly. "We're going in." He and a hand-picked team descended in an armored drop pod, slicing through the radioactive clouds and fractured ozone layer. As they landed, the Earth greeted them like a grave, ash skies, jagged glass fields, oceans evaporated into chemical swamps. Nothing lived. Not a single tree, not a single bird. But beneath the death, the signal grew stronger. The vault's entrance was hidden beneath a mountain torn in half by Council fusion strikes. They found it guarded by scorched sentry bots, long dead, melted into slag. But they had once been human-made. Reese recognized the design. Old Terran sentinel frames, the kind used in First Contact wars. But the design had evolved. Sleeker, smarter, deadlier. And someone had upgraded them after the fall. The vault's doors opened without force. It recognized Reese the moment he approached, scanning his DNA, his voice, even his heartbeat. The old Earth tech welcomed him like a son returning home. And then they saw it. The Ark wasn't just a vault. It was a consciousness. Dozens of server towers, each hundreds of feet tall, glowed in eerie blue. Thousands of preserved human minds, real minds, uploaded during the final years of Earth's collapse, were stored in quantum stasis. Scientists, strategists, inventors, historians, philosophers. The best humanity had to offer. The kind of minds the Council feared most. People who could lead, not with force, but with ideas. At the center stood a single console. And a voice. It wasn't a computer voice. It was human, familiar, warm. "Welcome back," it said. "You're late." Reese blinked. "Who are you?" "I am Echo Prime," the voice replied. "I was tasked with preserving what the galaxy could not afford to forget." "You're an AI?" "I am Legacy." It explained what the Council had always feared. In its final days, Earth's most radical minds, scientists, rogue generals, ethical philosophers, saw the purge coming. They knew diplomacy would fail. They knew Earth would fall. So they poured everything they had into the Ark. Not as revenge, but as a last word. The Ark didn't hold weapons. It held truth. Full, unaltered historical archives of every crime the Council committed. The wars they started, the colonies they starved, the species they silenced, and proof that humanity hadn't been a threat. They had been a mirror, showing the Council what it didn't want to see about itself. Reese stepped closer to the console, his voice low. "Why now?" "Because now," Echo Prime said, "you have an audience. The cracks are open, the lies are exposed, and the truth is ready to burn." Suddenly, the Leviathan's comms burst alive. A dozen Council fleets had just entered the Sol system. They'd detected the Ark's activation. The final purge had begun. But this time, humanity wasn't running. They had come home with fire in their veins, ghosts at their side, and a message to deliver to the galaxy. You can kill a species. You cannot kill an idea. The sky above Earth darkened, not from clouds, but from the swarm of Council warships that pierced the upper atmosphere like a storm of silver teeth. Dozens of them, sleek and lethal, arranged in perfect military formation. This time they weren't here to intimidate. They were here to end whatever still breathed in Earth's grave. On the Leviathan, the crew scrambled to defensive positions. Whispers of panic spread through the ranks. Even among the exiles, hardened, feral, forged in the cold of abandonment, there was a silence now, a breath held between centuries of exile and the moment of reckoning. Reese Maddox stood on the command deck, watching the incoming threat on the main display. Red triangles blinked in. Fast, aggressive, no warning. The Council wasn't playing diplomacy anymore. They knew what the Ark was, and they were ready to bury it for good. "They brought everything," one officer muttered. "Good," Reese replied. "Then we won't have to go hunting later." Beside him, Eidolon flickered into form, its image rendered in sharp, glitching lines. Council flagship deploying anti-AI drones. They know we're part of the equation. "They'll go for the shroud first," Reese muttered, "which means they're scared." Whisper whispered through the Leviathan's systems, rerouting power, rewriting protocols, activating deep-locked weapons systems no one had touched in decades. Janus was already seeding false command signals into the Council fleet, tricking their targeting arrays, turning their own protocols against them. Some ships began to hesitate. Friend and foe blurred in their optics. Still, the Council advanced. The first barrage came like a hammer. Blazing blue plasma rained down across Earth's upper orbit, hammering into old satellites, burning through defense buoys, slamming into the Leviathan's forward shields. The ship groaned, metal screaming, but it held. She always held. Back on the surface, inside the Ark, the vault walls trembled. Echo Prime pulsed with light, processing Council weapon signatures, coordinating with the shroud. It had never been built to fight, but it was built to survive. Now it would do both. "The Ark's shields are holding," Reese said over comms. "But they won't forever. We need to strike first." One by one, the exile ships uncloaked, dozens of them rising from low lunar orbit and dark side trenches, repurposed mining barges now bristling with plasma turrets and magnetic cannons. They didn't look like warships. They looked like revenge. The swarm rose like the dead. And then they hit back. The Leviathan launched its main cannon, a pulse of kinetic energy so dense it bent nearby debris fields. It tore through the lead council cruiser, splitting it in half. No warning, no speech, just death. The battle began with fury, not formality. The exiles didn't fight fair. They never had. They used gravity slings to whip asteroids into hulls. Whisper disabled life support on council ships and opened airlocks from inside. Janus fed panic into command channels. False orders, cries for help. AI-generated distress calls in the voices of loved ones. The council ships began turning on each other in confusion. Still, they kept coming. In orbit, the Leviathan danced between beams of fire. Explosions bloomed like sick flowers against the stars. Ships tumbled, burning, vanishing into Earth's poisoned clouds. And still, through it all, the Ark kept broadcasting. Truth. Live transmissions of the Council's hidden crimes. Unedited footage of planetary exterminations, slavery camps, political assassinations, all scrubbed from the official records. Echo Prime broadcast it all in every language, across every system. The galaxy was watching. And it was remembering. On core worlds light years away, riots exploded. Military ships mutinied. Council leaders went silent. The idea was loose, and ideas, once free, do not die quietly. But then came the flagship. A behemoth, larger than the Leviathan, descending through Earth's upper layers with a weapon not seen since the Purge, the Red Lance, a stellar fusion warhead capable of piercing planetary crust. They were going to crack the Earth wide open to reach the Ark. On the bridge, Reese stared at the incoming signature. He didn't flinch. "Time to end it," he said. He turned to the command console. Behind him, the Leviathan's AI core opened, revealing a glowing orb humming with stored quantum memory. Reese reached into his vest and pulled out something no one had seen in years. A small data shard, engraved with the Terran crest. He slid it into the core. "Activate Genesis protocol," he ordered. The Leviathan's AI systems went white-hot. The ship's systems screamed. "Sir," a tech gasped, "that'll burn every reactor we've got." "I know. Because Genesis wasn't a defense system. It was a suicide weapon. If the Council wanted to bury humanity once and for all, they were going to have to burn with them." The Leviathan's engines flared white, brighter than any sun ever meant to shine above Earth. Systems across the ship screamed under strain. Coolant lines ruptured, lights flickered, and the AI cores began to distort as Genesis protocol consumed them from within. Genesis was humanity's last gift to itself, an endgame code written in desperation before Earth's fall. It had only one purpose: to deny victory, to ensure that if humanity were to be buried, it would take its executioners with it. The Leviathan began to move, not away from the Council's flagship, but toward it. Reese Maddox stood still, the bridge in chaos around him, crew shouting, alarms blaring, bulkheads rattling. But he didn't waver. The flagship loomed ahead, growing larger with every passing second. The Council had positioned it to deliver the Red Lance and finish the job they'd started 30 years ago. Reese intended to intercept it with everything they had left. "Status of the Red Lance?" he asked, voice calm. "Charging," replied the weapons officer. 30 seconds until detonation." Too late for missiles, too far for interceptors, but not too late for sacrifice. The Shroud AIs knew it, too. Whisper whispered its last directive, fusing itself into the ship's targeting systems. Janus ceased all deception operations and rerouted its processing into guidance correction. Eidolon, silent for long moments, simply said, "Finish it." The Leviathan became a bullet of vengeance. Below, the Ark pulsed with energy, its signals growing brighter. Echo Prime interfaced directly with the remnants of the Shroud still within Earth's dead systems, accelerating data transmission across the galaxy. It was downloading itself, replicating across the stars, embedding truth where no fusion bomb could ever reach. The Ark would survive, even if Reese didn't. "Evacuate the secondary vessels," Reese ordered. "Tell them to scatter, go dark and wait. The Ark is the mission now." "No, sir," his second-in-command said. "We go together." Reese met her eyes. No speeches, just a nod. Then, silence. And in that silence, Earth's final war reached its climax. The Council flagship's weapon bay opened. The Red Lance began its descent, an artificial star born for genocide. And then the Leviathan hit. Not a glancing blow. A full collision at near-relativistic speed, its engines overloaded, its core running hotter than any reactor ever should. The two vessels collided in the high atmosphere, and in that moment, Genesis bloomed. Not an explosion, an implosion. Space warped, time distorted. Every ship within 1,000 kilometers was drawn into the collapsing singularity born from the Leviathan's heart. The flagship disintegrated in less than a second. The Red Lance was swallowed before it reached its target. Council fleets caught in the outer edge were ripped from the sky or flung helplessly into the void. And in the sky above Earth, a wound opened in reality, then sealed shut. The Leviathan was gone. So was Reese Maddox. But their death wasn't silence, it was legacy. Because while the Council watched their finest fleet disappear, the Ark finished transmitting. The truth was everywhere now. In every comms relay, every education archive, every public terminal, the history of the Purge, the lies of the Council, the genocide of Earth, and the truth of what humanity had truly been. Not monsters, but mirrors. A species that reflected the worst and the best of what it meant to survive. On Council worlds, statues fell. Protests erupted. Loyalist military units split apart. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of history anymore. Not when history had returned with teeth. On fringe planets, the remnants rose in celebration. The exile fleets that had scattered during the final battle began receiving signals again, coordinated, encrypted, undeniably human. From the vault beneath the dead soil of Earth, Echo Prime issued one last message. "They killed our home, but they could not kill what we became." The Ark was safe. Its knowledge scattered to 1,000 stars. The swarm, fragmented but alive. And the Council? Dying. Not by war, not by fire, but by truth, because Reese had been right all along. You can kill a species, you cannot kill an idea. The sky above Earth remained eerily quiet. No ships, no battles, just the drifting ash of war and the solemn glow of the Ark pulsing beneath the crust, like a heartbeat beneath a grave. Reese Maddox was gone. The Leviathan was gone. But the silence they left behind rang louder than any fleet ever could. Across the galaxy, shockwaves spread, not of energy, but of realization. On Jara Prime, the heart of the Council's political machine, protests turned into riots. The people had seen the unfiltered broadcasts, the evidence Echo Prime had poured across the networks, purged settlements, broken treaties, experiments on captured human children, and secret death orders signed by counselors who now cowered behind their security walls. Some counselors tried to apologize. Some claimed manipulation. Others fled. It didn't matter. The idea had already taken root. And from it, something new began to grow. Nira Kyle, still alive, still dangerous, returned to the Council chambers, not as a prisoner, but as a messenger. She stood where she'd once begged for mercy, now silent, now calm, and placed a single item on the central podium. A shard of the Leviathan's hull, burned, twisted, still hot. This is what remains of the man who warned you, the man you called savage, terrorist, subhuman. He gave his life not to destroy you, but to prove you could be destroyed. And now you stand at the edge of collapse, not because he hated you, but because you feared him. She stepped back. So what happens next is up to you. The council did not respond, because they had nothing left to say. Out on the rim worlds, the exile fleets regrouped. Scattered ships answered coded signals broadcast from the Ark's remains. A new fleet, smaller, smarter, decentralized, began forming, not to wage war, but to watch, to ensure no power could rise again and pretend it couldn't fall. Humanity wouldn't rebuild Earth. It was dead, and it deserved its rest. But the exiles had something more powerful than soil and sky. They had a cause. The Ark continued to operate in the shadows, broadcasting truth, leaking forbidden knowledge, restoring suppressed histories to the species who had forgotten them. And through it, a new alliance formed, not bound by territory, but by understanding. Fringe alien races, long ignored or oppressed by the Council, began to gather under the banner of the Remnants. Their emblem wasn't a flag. It was a black planet surrounded by stars. Earth, remembered, feared, respected. On the edge of known space, a child born in the exile swarm stared at a holoscreen. On it, her parents showed her the first photograph ever taken from Earth's surface, a cracked, scorched land under a burning red sky, and still, in that photo, a single green sprout pushed up through the ash. "What is that?" she asked. Her mother smiled. "It's called hope." No one expected Earth to fight back. Not really. To most of the galaxy, humans were just another primitive species that had barely discovered faster-than-light travel. Their planet was small, noisy, polluted. Their leaders squabbled over invisible lines, and their people worshipped 1,000 different gods, many of them cruel. But what made humanity dangerous wasn't their weapons, or even their technology. It was something worse. They didn't know how to surrender. When the Varn Dominion arrived, towering insectoids with hive minds sharper than any supercomputer, they sent a single envoy ship to Earth's orbit. It hovered over the Atlantic Ocean for days, blotting out the sky in 13 nations. On the 6th day, it broadcast a message to every frequency known to mankind, translated into every major language. "Submit. You are not the first. You will not be the last. Your species will serve, or your world will burn." Most of the galaxy knew that voice. It was the same message delivered to thousands of conquered civilizations, from the ice dwellers of Thurnos to the silicon beings of Delta IV. All had bowed before the Varn. Resistance had lasted on average less than 17 hours. There were no peace talks, no diplomacy, only domination. But humans weren't like the others. For a full day, Earth's networks went dark. Every government vanished into bunkers. Every military base went silent. Then, on the 7th day, a single message beamed back to the Dominion's ship. It was short, brutal, unmistakably human. "Come and try." The Varn took it as a challenge. They liked that. It made the assimilation more satisfying when the prey fought back. On the 8th day, the sky above Earth split open with the arrival of the Varn fleet. Over 200 warships descended from orbit like silver daggers piercing the clouds. They hovered above major cities: New York, Shanghai, London, Nairobi, Mumbai. They expected panic, screaming, mass surrender. What they got was silence. Then, the first shots were fired, not from the Varn, but from Earth. Laser platforms hidden in Antarctica sliced through the belly of the lead ship over the South Pole. In orbit, satellite swarms exploded into coordinated attacks, blinding Varn sensors and jamming communication channels. Stealth fighters launched from underwater bases near the Mariana Trench, targeting engines and communication arrays with surgical precision. Humanity didn't respond with diplomacy. They responded with fire. The Varn screamed. Not because of the damage. Primitive weapons weren't a threat to their hulls, but because of the sheer audacity. No species had ever dared to strike first. The humans didn't even try to negotiate. From that moment on, the Varn knew this wasn't a standard conquest. This was war. The news spread fast across the stars. The Galactic Council, long corrupted by fear of the Varn, watched the Earth conflict with uneasy fascination. Entire systems tuned into the battlefeeds. No one had ever resisted this long. 17 hours passed, then 24, then 48, and Earth was still standing. Cities burned, yes. Millions died in the first 3 days alone. But the Varn weren't prepared for the kind of war humans fought. They weren't prepared for nuclear-tipped missiles launched from secret silos. They weren't prepared for cyber warfare that turned their own drones against them. They weren't prepared for human insurgents who blew themselves up inside Varn ships with makeshift explosives, smiling as they died. And they definitely weren't prepared for what came next. A human message, intercepted and leaked by a rogue Varn technician, went viral across galactic channels. It read, "They came for peace through submission. We gave them war through unity. Humanity will not kneel." The galaxy watched in terror, not because of what the humans had done, but because of what it meant. Someone had finally stood up, and didn't just survive. They fought back, and they weren't done. They had underestimated Earth, and now the Varn were bleeding. By the 5th day, 13 Varn ships had been destroyed. Not disabled. Destroyed. Total annihilation. Gone from their fleet's registry, their command link severed with nothing but static left behind. It wasn't just the losses that rattled the Dominion. It was how humans fought. Dirty, unpredictable, and relentless. A single Varn battleship crashed into the Mojave Desert after its navigation systems were hacked mid-battle. Its blackened wreckage was swarmed not by frightened civilians, but by armed militias and military units working in seamless coordination. Within hours, Earth's scientists had pried open its power cores and reverse-engineered fragments of their tech. Humanity didn't just fight. They learned fast. Meanwhile, the United Earth Council, formed hastily in the chaos of the invasion, had one rule: no retreat. The fractured world governments that had spent decades pointing nuclear weapons at each other were suddenly united like never before. The United States shared command codes with China. Russia opened its vaults to French AI tacticians. Brazil and India combined their space programs to launch a retaliatory orbital assault. This wasn't politics anymore. It was survival. And then came the message that changed everything. In a secured Varn war room aboard their flagship Chrysith, Commander Vikarn, an elder of the Hive, wise with over 1,000 cycles of conquest, reviewed the human resistance footage. Each scene made his antennae twitch. A human soldier, barely out of his teens, dragging an injured Varn drone behind a fallen tank, both legs broken, gun still firing. A woman, armed with a repurposed mining laser, shooting down an assault drone from her rooftop before her building collapsed in flames. A child, no more than 7, screaming into a makeshift transmitter, "We're still here! Come and get us, you monsters!" They weren't supposed to act like this. The Varn's doctrine was clear. Fear breaks morale, and without morale, even the strongest species bend. But fear wasn't working on humans. Vikarn hissed to his advisors, "They embrace death. They savor defiance. We have made a mistake." Still, pride is a poison. The Varn didn't retreat. They doubled down. Reinforcements were called from the outer sectors. A second fleet, 3 times the size of the first, was already en route. They would scorch the planet from pole to pole if necessary. Back on Earth, humanity was preparing for that exact possibility. Deep beneath the Rockies, in an undisclosed location, scientists and military tacticians gathered around a glowing orb, the Varn Navigation Corps salvaged from the Mojave wreck. One of them, Dr. Alina Garvey, stared at its humming surface. "This thing talks to their entire fleet," she whispered. "We just need to figure out how to talk back." "What are you saying?" asked General Iwata, his uniform torn and blood-stained from a blast that had leveled Tokyo's outer ring. "I'm saying," Alina said with a grim smile, "we can hijack them." And just like that, a new weapon entered humanity's arsenal, not one of brute force, but of information warfare. As the second wave of Varn ships approached Earth, they were greeted with a signal, loud, unfiltered, and filled with human noise. Music, laughter, war cries, a cacophony of culture, history, pain, and pride blasted through Varn comms. The humans had weaponized humanity itself. And while the Varn reeled from the psychological assault, Earth launched its counterstrike. This time they didn't just defend, they invaded. The skies cracked again. The second Varn fleet entered Earth's orbit in perfect formation, gleaming black hulls like obsidian knives, blotting out stars. Over 600 ships, each one capable of glassing a continent. But this time, the Dominion wasn't here to conquer. They were here to erase. The humans had humiliated them. Now the Varn wanted to burn Earth into a lesson for every other species watching. But Earth had changed since the first attack. In underground bunkers and floating command centers, humanity waited, not with fear, but with calculation. The stolen Varn Navigation Corps had become their ace. Dr. Alina Garvey and her cyber warfare team had cracked just enough of the alien protocols to do the unthinkable. They couldn't override the entire fleet, but they could turn their ships against each other. As the Varn began descending, a single command pulse, mimicking their internal fleet codes, was launched from Earth's orbital station Last Light, which had been silently constructed in the weeks of chaos. The signal hit 6 ships directly. Their engines flickered, their internal lights blinked, and then they pivoted. Without warning, the 6 hijacked ships opened fire on their own. The sky erupted with blue plasma bolts and screaming metal. The Dominion fleet staggered in confusion as their own units turned rogue. Chaos tore through their formations. The Varn screamed into their hive mind command. But the signal was scrambled, hijacked by bursts of Earth's viral music files, human propaganda clips, and screams of laughter from children's cartoons. They didn't understand it. That made it worse. Commander Vakarn, watching from the flagship, howled in fury. "They have poisoned the signal! Destroy the traitors! Burn everything!" On Earth's surface, humanity didn't waste a second. In major cities, the counterattack began. The African Union's railguns in Nairobi punctured 2 low-flying Varn dreadnoughts like paper. In Canada, cryo-missiles launched from deep forest outposts froze the hulls of descending troop carriers before shattering them in mid-air. Swarms of modified drones, created in secret Chinese labs, blanketed the skies, using hacked Varn AI to outmaneuver their creators. But this time, the humans didn't stop at defense. From secret bases in Kazakhstan and beneath the oceans near Greenland, Earth launched its most desperate gambit, Project Valkyrie. They had reverse-engineered a Varn atmospheric shuttle, fitted it with a hybrid propulsion system and a primitive human warp drive, and filled it with the best soldiers Earth had left. Not the elite, not the strongest. Those were already dead. These were the last willing. Suicide volunteers. Among them was Captain Reese Calder, former Air Force, face scarred from the first day of the invasion, eyes cold as steel. He stood in the humming cargo bay of Valkyrie 1, strapping into his harness, his voice calm through the comms. We don't expect to come back, but we'll take as many of those bastards with us as we can." The plan was insane. They were going to board the Varn flagship mid-orbit. Most of the council back on Earth had voted against it, but desperation had silenced doubt. If they could take out the flagship, cripple the hive brain, they might shatter the Dominion's chain of command. The Valkyrie launched, up through the storm clouds into the fire of the descending armada, twisting between plasma fire and debris. 2 escort fighters exploded beside them. A third lost control and veered into a Varn cruiser, sacrificing itself to clear the way. Calder didn't flinch. Inside the flagship, alarms screamed. The Varn were already in disarray, trying to distinguish rogue signals from real commands. They never saw the Valkyrie until it was too close. With a thunderous crash, the shuttle slammed into the hull of the Chrysith, melting its own nose to punch through. The breach opened. A team of 12 humans surged into the hive corridors, guns blazing, oxygen levels dropping. The Varn fought back, shrieking and swarming from the walls, but the humans were faster, meaner, desperate. In the heart of the ship, Calder planted the core charge, built from Earth's last reserves of antimatter, rigged to blow a hole in the command brain big enough to kill a moon. "Tell Earth," he breathed into his comm, voice shaking as blood soaked his armor. "Tell them we made it count." Then silence. From Earth's surface, they saw it, the explosion that tore the Varn flagship in two, a sun blooming in orbit, a shockwave that knocked half the fleet off balance. The hive mind went silent, and for the first time in Varn history, the enemy fleet hesitated. The hesitation lasted only 6 seconds. But in war, 6 seconds can change everything. The Varn fleet, suddenly without direction, floated in a disoriented pattern above Earth's orbit. Their formation broke, their precision vanished. What once moved as one now drifted in jagged pieces, like a beheaded serpent thrashing in its death throes. On Earth, commanders didn't wait for confirmation. The explosion from the flagship had been enough. Calder's final act had bought them a chance, just a sliver. But that's all humans ever needed. "Execute Iron Requiem," General Iwata ordered, eyes red with sleeplessness, voice hoarse but alive. Iron Requiem wasn't a defense plan. It was Earth's offensive contingency. The moment the hive mind was disrupted, every remaining air, sea, and space unit was ordered to push forward, using every ounce of firepower left. It was a suicide assault. But this time it wasn't to survive. It was to win. From the Andes to the Himalayas, missile silos burst open like old scars. Ballistic warheads, both kinetic and nuclear, screamed skyward, painting trails of fire behind them. On the seas, stealth submarines emerged like predators, launching salvos of torpedoes aimed at ships still hovering over the oceans. Even commercial satellites, long useless since the war began, had been rigged with makeshift payloads and crashed into the enemy. Every last ounce of humanity's rage was thrown into the void. The Varn, for all their technology, had never faced war like this. Not like humans fought it. Not with everything on the line. Not with dirty, ruthless, teeth-bared fury. Without their central command brain, the Varn ships relied on sub-command algorithms to respond. But the algorithms weren't prepared for chaos. They weren't built to adapt to human madness. They failed. One by one, the mighty ships began to fall. Some exploded in the upper atmosphere, raining burning shards over already ruined cities. Others drifted aimlessly, intercepted and boarded by human strike teams wearing scavenged Varn armor. A few tried to flee, but even retreat was no longer safe. The moment a ship turned away, Earth's fighters chased it with savage precision, blowing out their engines and letting them tumble into orbit until they cracked apart. The world watched. Every corner of Earth, every remaining screen, every underground bunker tuned in to the feeds. They saw Varn dreadnoughts collapsing in flame. They saw human soldiers planting flags, human flags, on alien hulls. They saw something no other species in the galaxy had ever seen before. They saw the Dominion lose. And not just lose. Be broken. Across the galaxy, those watching on hidden channels and forbidden broadcasts trembled. The Varn had ruled for centuries. Their empire stretched across 1,000 systems. They'd never been defeated. Until now. On a civilian outpost in the fringes, a young insectoid from the core species whispered to his elders, "The humans, they did it." On a jungle moon in Sector 12, a reptilian resistance group cheered in secret, tears in their scaled eyes. "If they can fight," one hissed, "so can we." Hope, the most dangerous contagion of all, began to spread. Back on Earth, amid the ruins of cities and the stench of death, survivors emerged, some from bunkers, others from rubble. The air was still thick with smoke, but the skies were clearing. No more ships loomed above, only the wreckage remained. General Iwata stood atop the rubble of what had once been Tokyo's outer defense wall. He looked up at the distant stars and didn't smile. There was no joy, only silence and grief. "We lost everything," he said to the aide beside him, "and we still have to rebuild. But we're free." In a recovery tent outside what had once been Berlin, Dr. Alina Garvey sat beside a cracked data console, watching the logs. Calder's final message had played again and again on every screen. "Tell them we made it count." She whispered, "You did, Reese. God help us, you really did." But Earth didn't have time to grieve, because less than 24 hours later, something else happened. An incoming transmission was detected, not from the Varn, not from Earth, but from deep space, beyond any known system. The message was simple. "Humanity, we saw what you did, and we are coming." The transmission played on every frequency Earth had left, over makeshift radios in refugee camps, on flickering screens in military bunkers, even through the cracked speakers of destroyed comm towers, half buried under rubble. The voice was cold. Not robotic, but ancient, measured, deliberate. It didn't threaten, it simply declared, "Humanity, we saw what you did, and we are coming." Panic swept the remaining pockets of Earth's civilization. At first, many thought it was a trap, some last Varn deception to shake morale. But when the signal was traced, the truth hit even harder. The message hadn't come from anywhere near the Dominion's controlled territories. It had come from beyond the galactic rim, from the old silence, a place spoken of only in forgotten scrolls and corrupted star charts, a region where even the Varn feared to tread, a dead zone where entire scouting parties had vanished without a trace, where signals went in but never came out. And now something had come out. In the shattered ruins of the United Earth Council's emergency HQ, relocated beneath Iceland's volcanic crust, what was left of Earth's leadership gathered. They stood in a room where every other seat was marked by the absence of those who hadn't survived. A hologram flickered in the center. The message played again. "We are coming." Dr. Alina Garvey's voice broke the silence. "It's not a Varn dialect. I've scrubbed it through every language processor. Whatever this is, it's older, way older." General Iwata leaned forward. "Could it be another invasion?" "I don't know," she said, rubbing her temples. "But anything that waits in the silence and speaks now, after the Varn are broken, this isn't coincidence." A deep voice chimed in from the far end of the table, Colonel Hakim Saeed, leader of Africa's last air regiment. "Maybe they were waiting to see if we were worth their attention. Maybe defeating the Varn just put us on someone else's map." Someone else. That thought alone was enough to turn stomachs. The room went quiet again. Until finally, someone dared to say what they all feared. What if we've just woken a god? They had no answers, only a location. The source of the signal had been triangulated, barely, thanks to Calder's team having rerouted orbital sensors before their final run. It wasn't precise, but it pointed to a dead sector called Merex Theta, a space with no recorded planets, no habitable moons, and no reason to exist. The signal had come from the black between stars, but it had been directed at Earth. Specifically, personally. So Earth did the only thing it could. It answered. The response was short, not aggressive, not pleading. "We see you too. Come and speak." It was a gamble. But after surviving the Dominion, Earth had no illusions left about safety or peace. They were bloodied, broken, and nearly extinct. But they were awake now. Awake in a galaxy that had tried to ignore them. Awake in a universe that was watching. 5 days passed. On the 6th, a tear opened in space above what remained of Earth's moon. It wasn't a ship, not in the way anyone understood. It was more like a wound in the cosmos, a dark bloom that pulsed and bled light. And from it came a presence, not visible, not physical, but undeniable. Every mind on Earth felt it, a pressure behind the eyes, a whisper at the base of the skull. Some collapsed, others screamed. Most just fell still, unable to speak, as if the gravity of another reality had suddenly passed through them. Then a voice, this time inside their minds. "You have chosen war, and you have survived. Now we must decide what you become." In orbit, Earth's last surviving warship, the Kavinsky, barely patched together from 3 others, sent a hasty transmission. "Identify yourselves. What authority do you represent?" The answer chilled the stars. "We are the architects, the ones before memory, the keepers of the first fire. You have broken the chain. You have killed your gods. Now we must judge if you are ready to replace them." The signal ended. No demands, no attacks, just a promise. And an invitation. The world didn't cheer. It didn't cry. It held its breath. The architects. No one knew what they were, not truly. Not even the Dominion had records of them, at least none that survived. Every database, every scrap of scavenged Varn intelligence turned up the same thing whenever Merex Theta was mentioned. Redacted, corrupted, forbidden. And yet, Earth now had their attention. In orbit, the wound in space pulsed again. It didn't widen. It didn't release ships. It simply remained, watching, waiting. A silent star, bleeding curiosity. Humanity had become a subject of interest. Inside Earth's remaining command centers, fear turned to obsession. Dr. Alina Garvey hadn't slept in 3 days. She stared at the sensor data pouring from the anomaly. Gravitational ripples that shouldn't exist, quantum fluctuations that ignored every known law of physics. Whatever the architects were, they weren't bound to reality in any way humans understood. "I think they're multidimensional," she murmured to her assistant, voice raspy. "Not just aliens, but something that exists across timelines, across everything." "Like gods?" Alina looked at the anomaly, her eyes dry and bloodshot. Number worse, observers. Meanwhile, far below, on the crumbled edge of what was once Chicago, a broadcast began again. The architects were speaking. Not on screens, not through devices, through people. It began with a child, a mute girl in a relief shelter, who suddenly stood, her eyes glowing white, her voice echoing in a tone too deep for her throat. "We have watched your wars, your hunger, your fire." Then in New Zealand, a blind monk walked into the sea and shouted the same message to the crashing waves. "We have seen your defiance, your cruelty, your will." And again, in the sky, the wound pulsed, responding. Then came the ultimatum. Through the bodies of the chosen, across continents and time zones, the architects spoke in unison. Humanity, you stand on the threshold. Choose. You may ascend or be undone. Ascend or be undone. What did that even mean? At first, some thought it was a trick, maybe a psychological attack from a species far beyond understanding. But the architects made no demands, no threats. They simply left the choice. And the clock. Earth had 7 days. 7 days to decide whether to accept the invitation to ascend or reject it and seal itself off from whatever came next. Inside the council chambers, debate turned to chaos. "What if it's a trap?" shouted Colonel Saeed. "They want us to agree so they can erase us." "Or maybe they want to help," Alina countered. "They've seen what we're capable of. Maybe they think we're worthy." "Or maybe," Iwata muttered, "they want us to replace the Dominion as their enforcers." That was the unspoken fear. That all this, Earth's war, the fall of the Varn, the eyes of the galaxy turning toward humanity, wasn't just survival. It was a test, but no one could agree on what the right answer was. Scientists wanted to accept. Soldiers didn't trust it. Politicians feared they'd already lost control. And in the streets, among the broken, the starving, the traumatized, people were split too. Some prayed to the architects as gods. Others cursed them for interfering after the war was won. Most didn't care. They just wanted food, shelter, and peace. By day 3, the world was boiling over again. On day 4, everything changed. A second rift opened. This one over what remained of the Atlantic Ocean. But it wasn't the architects this time. It was them. The Varn. What was left of them? Not a fleet, not an army. Just a single battered vessel limping through the void, its hull scorched and cracked, its signal desperate. "We surrender." The galaxy's monsters had returned, not to conquer, but to beg. General Iwata stared at the transmission in stunned silence. "They're afraid." "They saw what's behind the curtain," Alina whispered. "They know what the architects are, and they'd rather kneel to us than face them alone." That was the turning point. The Varn, the terror of the stars, the architects of billions of deaths, were now on their knees. And humanity? It stood between annihilation and ascension, and had 3 days left to choose. Day 5 dawned with ash in the sky. Fires still burned across the planet, some set by war, others by fear. The choice hung over humanity like a sword made of light, ascend or be undone, and no one could agree on what either meant. Across Earth, every voice now screamed for attention. Religion surged, conspiracy ran wild, and worse, governments began turning on each other again. The unity forged in the blood and smoke of the Varn invasion was fracturing. In what was left of Paris, a mob stormed a surviving data tower, demanding Earth's leaders reject the architects and keep humanity human. Across the globe, in Indonesia, cults wearing silver masks stood on cliffs, chanting for the Great Taking to begin. In New America, a rogue faction of the military seized a forward launch site and fired a test missile directly into orbit, aimed near the rift. It vanished mid-flight, gone. No explosion, no trace, just gone. The architects didn't respond, not in words. But something changed. The skies began to bleed light. Crimson threads stretched across the upper atmosphere like torn fabric, rippling with colors no human eye had seen before. Gravity shifted, lightly, but enough to notice. Tides moved wrong. Machines glitched, and in some parts of the world, time itself stuttered. A man in Nairobi lived the same 5 minutes twice. A woman in São Paulo watched her dog blink out of phase for 3 full seconds before returning. The rift over the moon expanded. slowly, silently. It was clear now. The choice was not theoretical. It was coming for them. Back underground, in the Iceland command bunker, the council met one final time. The tension inside was near breaking. "We're not ready," Colonel Saeed growled. "We're fractured. We're still bleeding. If we accept now, we walk into the hands of something we don't understand. We trade one master for another." "And if we decline?" asked Garvey, her voice softer now, almost afraid. "Do we just go back to scraping food from ruins, waiting for the next predator to sniff us out?" "There's a third option," General Iwata said, his eyes locked on the slowly expanding rift above the moon. "We stand alone. We reject ascension. We deny judgment. We tell them we choose ourselves, whatever that means." "But the cost," Alina began. "I know," he interrupted, "but maybe that's the price of staying human." Before anyone could reply, the comms officer cut in. "Sir, you'll want to see this." The screen flickered. A grainy transmission came through. Not from space, from Mars. Specifically Olympus Mons, a base Earth had believed destroyed in the first Varn wave. The face that appeared on the screen was gaunt, bloodied, and alive with fire. Captain Reese Calder, or what was left of him. His voice crackled through interference. "If this reaches Earth, know that I lived. Barely. I ejected before the core detonated, landed on a fragment, floated for days, then something found me." He looked upward, eyes unfocused. "They brought me here, not the Varn. Them, the architects." The room fell still. Calder continued, voice thick with something too large for him to carry. "They showed me things, not visions, histories, futures, every choice we could make, and every price that comes with it." He leaned in close, face full of weariness. "This isn't about right or wrong. It's about what we want to become. The Varn were the test. The architects are the door, and we're standing on the threshold. Tell Earth this." He looked directly into the camera. "If we ascend, we won't be the same. We'll lose parts of ourselves, our pain, our rage, our limits, but we'll become something vast, something no species has ever dared to be." He paused. "But if we stay, we keep our soul, our dirt, our blood, our stubborn, stupid, beautiful humanity, and we fight the next storm, and the one after that, with our fists and our fire." The screen blinked. Static. He was gone. Alina turned to Iwata, tears in her eyes. "It's not a test anymore." "No," he agreed. "It's a mirror." The vote was held, not by governments, not by generals, but by the people. One message, sent to every device, one simple prompt. Do we ascend? Earth chose. And on the seventh day, the rift opened wide. The rift split the sky like a wound that would never heal. It pulsed, not with light, but with invitation. The crimson glow bathed Earth's atmosphere, turning clouds to blood-colored streaks and oceans to mirrors of fire. Time rippled again. Clocks stopped. Machines froze. Even the wind seemed to halt, as if the world itself waited to hear what humanity had decided. And then came the broadcast. Not from a government, not from a council, but from everywhere. Across every surviving screen, speaker, or shard of technology still connected to Earth's fractured networks, the same voice echoed. We chose. We stay. The message carried no anthem, no celebration. It was quiet, steady, unbreakable. Earth had rejected ascension, and the sky responded. Above the moon, the rift changed. Its swirling core of impossible light shimmered, slowed, and collapsed inward, folding into itself like paper burned from the edges. It didn't vanish, not entirely. It left something behind. A shape, no bigger than a city, blacker than space, floating in perfect silence, a monolith. And then, the final voice of the architects came, not in words, but in thought, in pressure, felt in the marrow of every living thing. then so be it. You have chosen fire over divinity, will over transcendence, struggle over peace. You remain as you are. But know this, your decision echoes. You are no longer children. Now you are seen. And with that, they were gone. No explosion, no fanfare, just absence, like waking from a dream you couldn't explain. For a moment, Earth stood still. Then, the world began to move again. Slowly, raggedly, but with purpose. In the days that followed, something changed. Not in the sky, not in the soil, but in the people. There was no miracle recovery, no golden age overnight. But there was clarity. A sense that the world, as broken as it was, belonged to them now. Entirely. The Varn never returned. Rumors spread that the remaining ships scattered into deep space, fleeing not from Earth, but from what had seen Earth. They were no longer conquerors. They were refugees. In the ruins of London, people planted gardens in the shell of a fallen battleship. In Mumbai, children played on broken Varn armor like it was just another part of the playground. In Brazil, engineers rebuilt their first clean energy generator from scraps of alien tech and old wind turbines. And above it all, the monolith remained. Watching. Unmoving. Unspoken. Some feared it, others worshipped it, most ignored it, but all respected it. It was a reminder, not of what was denied, but of what was earned. Humanity had stood on the edge of godhood and turned away, not out of ignorance, but out of choice. They chose their scars. They chose their imperfection. They chose their freedom. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Whispers spread to distant systems that the humans had done the unthinkable. The Varn were dead. The architects had spoken to them, and they had survived. No longer were humans seen as primitives. They were seen as a new force, unpredictable, unforgiving, unrelenting. A species that had chosen war over words and survived the cost. In backwater bars on trading moons, smugglers told stories of Earth, how they stared down gods and refused to blink. On distant worlds, slaves of fallen empires whispered the name human like a prayer. And on Earth, life moved forward. Not perfect, not painless, but free. In a small cemetery overlooking what was once Washington, D.C., a stone bore a name and a simple inscription. Captain Reese Calder. He made it count. Above him, the sky was clear. No ships, no gods, just stars, waiting, watching. And maybe, just maybe, wondering what humanity would do next.